Vulnerability is often misunderstood because in a world that glorifies strength, toughness, and resilience, openness can appear like fragility. But to allow oneself to be seen fully, without the masks and performances that most people carry, is not an act of weakness. It is one of the rarest forms of strength. To open yourself means you are taking a risk. You are handing someone the ability to judge, to hurt, to misunderstand, and yet you choose honesty over protection. That choice itself requires more courage than shutting down and pretending to be untouchable. Fragility breaks under pressure, but vulnerability bends, adapts, and endures because it is rooted in authenticity rather than performance. The paradox is striking. People spend their lives trying to appear invulnerable, believing it will protect them, yet this very armor isolates them from genuine connection. When someone shows vulnerability, they create a bridge that allows others to step closer. They say without words, "This is who I am, unfiltered." That act invites trust because it signals confidence strong enough to withstand the risk of being seen. Pretending to be flawless feels safe, but it keeps intimacy at bay. Being open to reveal flaws, doubts, or fears creates depth because the courage to show imperfection resonates universally. Consider how relationships develop. Trust does not grow in the presence of perfection, but in the sharing of struggles, uncertainties, and raw truth. When someone admits they are scared, or when they reveal a wound they usually hide, it gives the other person permission to lower their own guard. That exchange is what builds real bonds. This is why vulnerability is not fragility. It is in fact a catalyst for stronger, more authentic connections. Fragility is avoidance, while vulnerability is acceptance of reality without disguise. In leadership, too, vulnerability is transformative. Leaders who act as though they have all the answers may inspire short-term obedience, but leaders who admit they are learning, who seek input, who acknowledge mistakes, inspire loyalty and collaboration. They show their humanity, and that humanity encourages others to step into theirs. Vulnerability in leadership is not weakness. It is a signal of confidence, of being secure enough to share the spotlight, to admit the limits of one's knowledge, and to rely on others. That is how teams thrive, not through a faff-ad of invincibility. The same principle applies in personal growth. To acknowledge the areas where you are afraid, uncertain, or even failing is the only way to move forward. Denial locks growth in place, while vulnerability opens the door to change. It is easier to pretend everything is fine, to mask insecurities with bravado, but true progress happens when you admit the truth to yourself and dare to share it with others. This is why people who embrace vulnerability are often the most resilient. They do not waste energy on maintaining an image, they channel it toward authentic living. Vulnerability is strength disguised as tenderness because tenderness itself is rare in a world hardened by fear of rejection. When someone dares to be tender, they are demonstrating they are not afraid to feel, to care, to risk disappointment. They choose connection over protection, even though protection may seem safer. This choice requires a resilience that fragility could never manage. Fragility collapses when tested. Vulnerability, however, withstands because it accepts the risk and endures anyway. Attention is one of the most valuable yet underestimated resources a person can give because it cannot be faked or reclaimed once it has been spent. In a world flooded with distractions, divided screens, constant notifications, and shortened attention spans, the simple act of focusing fully on someone or something has become a rare gesture of respect. When attention is given consistently, it communicates value without needing words because presence signals priority. Where energy flows, meaning grows, and people intuitively recognize when they are being seen versus when they are merely being tolerated. Attention functions as an unspoken form of currency because it invests worth in whatever it is directed toward, whether a person, an idea, or a goal. The silent message of attention is unmistakable. When someone consistently makes time to listen, to notice, to engage, it affirms that the subject of their focus matters. Unlike money or gifts, attention cannot be outsourced. It demands presence, patience, and a willingness to withhold competing interests. That is why attention feels more valuable than words of affirmation alone. Words can flatter, but attention requires action. The choice to prioritize one thing over many others. It is a signal that says, you are worth my time, my energy, and my focus. And in relationships, whether personal or professional, that signal often determines the level of trust and loyalty that will follow. Consistency of attention is even more powerful than intensity. A single burst of focus may feel special, but when attention is inconsistent, it raises doubts about value. When attention is steady, even in small doses, it creates security. People thrive when they know they are being noticed regularly. Children who are given consistent attention grow in confidence. Teams with leaders who pay attention to their efforts feel valued and motivated. Partners who offer attention build bonds that withstand challenges. The principle is the same across all human connections. Where attention is invested, value is silently communicated, and trust begins to compound. The absence of attention, on the other hand, communicates neglect just as strongly. Being present physically but absent mentally is a form of invisibility that leaves others feeling dismissed. When attention is withheld, it tells a person that they are not a priority, even if no words are spoken. This is why ignoring someone or failing to notice small details often hurts more deeply than harsh words. Neglect communicates insignificance, while attention communicates importance. What makes this dynamic powerful is that it happens beneath language. People may not articulate it, but they feel it immediately. Attention is also currency because it must be spent wisely. Whatever receives your focus grows in influence. When energy is consistently directed at distractions, comparison, or meaningless noise, those things begin to dominate life. But when attention is directed intentionally toward meaningful goals, growth and clarity follow. This is why leaders, creatives, and visionaries guard their attention as their most precious asset. They understand that attention determines direction, and direction shapes outcomes. Every choice to pay attention to one thing is simultaneously a choice to ignore something else, which makes attention an act of silent judgment about value. What makes attention unique is its reciprocity. When you give it freely, it tends to be returned. People mirror the presents they are offered. A friend who feels listened to is more likely to listen in return. A partner who feels seen is more likely to see. A colleague who feels noticed is more likely to notice others. Attention circulates like currency, enriching the environment where it flows. Unlike money, which can be hoarded, attention loses its power when withheld. Its value comes from movement, from being shared and exchanged in authentic presence. Attention, therefore, is more than focus. It is an unspoken declaration of worth. It is a daily choice that signals priorities more clearly than promises ever could. Where attention goes, trust, intimacy, and influence inevitably follow, because consistent focus silently communicates again and again that what lies before you matters. Would you like me to expand Aztec's consistency builds trust, not intensity? Next, in the same 600-word keynote style. Consistency is one of the most underestimated forces in human connection, yet it is the bedrock upon which trust is built. Intensity, with all its excitement and grandeur, often captures attention quickly, but it rarely sustains the foundation needed for loyalty, safety, and long-term reliability. A steady presence, even in small doses, holds far more power than grand gestures that appear dazzling in the moment but vanish as soon as they arrive. People may be impressed by intensity, but they only trust consistency, because consistency proves reliability over time, while intensity proves only possibility in the moment. Consider the difference between fireworks and the sunrise. Fireworks light up the sky brilliantly, but they are short-lived, gone as quickly as they appear. The sunrise, though quieter and less dramatic, happens every day without fail. It does not need applause or spectacle because its very dependability makes it transformative. Trust functions in the same way. Grand gestures may create moments of awe, but they cannot sustain a bond. What sustains connection is the quiet, predictable rhythm of being there, showing up, and honoring commitment. In relationships, consistency means remembering the details that matter, following through on promises, and offering presence, not just in moments of celebration, but also in moments of silence. Intensity may show up as a sudden bouquet of flowers, a surprise trip, or a dramatic declaration of care, but without consistent presence, those gestures begin to feel hollow. They raise expectations but fail to meet the deeper need for reliability. People do not simply want to be impressed, they want to feel safe, and safety is born out of knowing that someone will continue to show up when it matters most. In leadership, consistency is the difference between fleeting motivation and lasting inspiration. A leader who gives one powerful speech may ignite energy for a day, but a leader who consistently listens, supports, and communicates earns loyalty that lasts for years. Intensity may capture attention once, but consistency builds culture. Teams flourish when they know what to expect, when they can rely on their leader's presence and fairness, and when promises are backed by action again and again. Trust grows not because of dramatic moments, but because of daily dependability. Even in personal growth, consistency outweighs intensity. A person may push themselves with extreme effort for a short time, an intense workout, a strict diet, an ambitious burst of productivity. But if those efforts are not sustainable, the results fade. Progress is not created by rare extremes, but by steady, repeated choices. Reading a few pages daily builds more knowledge than reading frantically once a month. Exercising moderately but consistently shapes health more effectively than pushing to exhaustion only occasionally. Consistency creates change that lasts because it builds habits that are stronger than moods or circumstances. What makes consistency powerful is that it speaks to character. Anyone can perform dramatically once, but only someone with discipline, commitment, and integrity can remain steady over time. This steadiness communicates a message louder than words. I can be counted on. Trust cannot be forced with one intense act. It is earned through the patient repetition of reliability. Intensity may impress the mind, but consistency wins the heart. The danger of intensity without consistency is disillusionment. People may feel swept up in the beauty of a grand gesture, only to feel abandoned when the consistency is missing. Over time, intensity without reliability breeds disappointment because it raises hopes and then leaves them unmet. In contrast, even small acts of consistency, checking in regularly, remembering commitments, honoring time, become anchors that hold relationships, teams, and personal lives steady. A steady presence matters more than grand gestures because presence creates security. Security leads to trust, and trust allows for depth. Without trust, no amount of intensity can sustain connection. With consistency, even modest actions grow into profound bonds because they prove again and again that what was promised will be delivered not just once but always. Do you want me to move forward and expand? Alex, unspoken needs carry the loudest weight in the same 600-word keynote style. Unspoken needs often carry more weight than the words people choose to say out loud, because what remains unexpressed usually stems from the deepest layers of desire, fear, or longing. Language is powerful, but it is also limited. Many of the most important human needs do not come packaged neatly into sentences. Instead, they reveal themselves through silence, through body language, through subtle patterns of behavior, and through the moments when someone withdraws rather than explains. The weight of unspoken needs lies in the fact that they shape connection, yet they often remain invisible until carefully observed. People rarely verbalize their deepest needs for two reasons. Sometimes it is because they do not fully know how to articulate them, and other times it is because they fear being judged, misunderstood, or dismissed. To admit a need is to admit vulnerability, and vulnerability carries risk. So instead of speaking, people hope to be noticed without having to ask. They long for their needs to be understood intuitively, as if being recognized without explanation would prove their worth. This creates an invisible tension in relationships, where words may suggest contentment, but silence tells another story. The challenge is that unspoken needs are not silent in their impact. They shape behavior in powerful ways. A colleague who feels unacknowledged may not complain directly, but may lose motivation over time. A partner who feels unseen may not verbalize it, but may slowly withdraw, offering less warmth or less enthusiasm. A friend who feels unsupported may never say it out loud, but may drift away, leaving behind unanswered calls or missed opportunities to connect. What is not said often defines the reality of the relationship more than what is spoken. Unspoken needs also show themselves in repetition. When someone repeatedly mentions small details, when they highlight the same story, or when they react strongly to something seemingly minor, it often signals an unexpressed need underneath. A person who repeatedly asks if they are in the way may be voicing a hidden desire to feel valued. A person who constantly jokes about being forgotten may actually be revealing a need for reassurance. Listening between the lines requires more than hearing words. It requires paying attention to the patterns, the silences, and the subtle cues that carry deeper meaning. In leadership, this principle is critical. Teams often carry unspoken needs that are not directly voiced: the need for recognition, the need for clarity, the need for security. A leader who listens only to what is explicitly said will miss the deeper truth. But a leader who notices the sighs in meetings, the hesitation before speaking, or the quiet withdrawal of certain individuals will uncover the hidden weight of unspoken needs. Addressing these unspoken needs builds loyalty and trust because it demonstrates awareness beyond the surface. In personal growth, unspoken needs also play a defining role. Many people live with longings they never articulate to themselves. They may mask the desire for meaning with business or the desire for love with ambition. Yet until those needs are acknowledged, they weigh heavily on the heart, shaping choices and creating dissatisfaction. Becoming aware of one's own unspoken needs requires courage to listen inwardly, to ask, what is it I am truly longing for that I have not admitted? That question alone often reveals truths that explain years of frustration or yearning. What gives unspoken needs their power is that they cannot be ignored indefinitely. They will find expression whether through frustration, distance, or longing. Relationships that ignore unspoken needs often collapse under the strain, while relationships that recognize and honor them grow stronger. Meeting unspoken needs is not about guessing perfectly. It is about creating space where those needs feel safe to emerge, where silence is respected as much as words, and where people know they will not be dismissed for revealing what matters most. Would you like me to continue and expand $swatch? Respect is the invisible foundation in the same keynote style. Respect is the invisible foundation upon which every meaningful connection is built, and without it, no amount of effort, affection, or intention can hold a relationship together. It is invisible because it is not always spoken about directly, yet it is felt in every interaction. Respect determines tone, shapes behavior, and establishes whether trust and safety can exist. While many people believe that love, passion, or shared goals are what sustain connection, the truth is that respect is the quiet force that makes all of those things possible. Without respect, effort feels empty because the dignity of the other person is not being honored. Respect is more than politeness or courtesy. It is the recognition of another person's inherent worth. It means valuing their perspective, honoring their boundaries, and treating their individuality as sacred. When respect is present, even disagreements do not destroy connection because both people know that they are still seen and valued. But when respect is missing, even the kindest gestures lose their meaning. A gift, an apology, or a compliment given without respect feels transactional, insincere, or manipulative. Respect is what makes those same gestures authentic and powerful, because it assures the recipient that their humanity is recognized. In relationships, respect is expressed through consistency of action. It is not in dramatic declarations, but in the daily choices to listen, to consider, to not dismiss. It shows up in the way one speaks about another in their absence, in the willingness to honor commitments, and in the ability to disagree without demeaning. Relationships may survive periods of conflict, distance, or stress, but they cannot survive the erosion of respect. Once dignity is compromised, trust begins to collapse, and no amount of effort can fully repair it unless respect is restored. In leadership, respect is the foundation of influence. Authority may command obedience temporarily, but only respect creates genuine loyalty. People follow leaders not because of their title, but because of how those leaders treat them. Respect in leadership means valuing input, acknowledging contributions, and being transparent. A leader who disrespects their team may still achieve short-term results, but the culture will inevitably weaken, morale will decline, and turnover will rise. Respect is what sustains motivation, because it affirms that people are more than tools for productivity. They are human beings whose contributions matter. Respect also plays a central role in personal growth. Self-respect forms the basis for how a person allows themselves to be treated. Without self-respect, boundaries become porous, and external validation becomes the primary measure of worth. With self-respect, however, choices become clearer, because compromise is not made at the cost of dignity. Effort applied without self-respect often leads to burnout and resentment, while effort grounded in respect for one's own limits and values leads to sustainable growth. The invisibility of respect often makes it easy to overlook, but its absence is always felt. A single dismissive tone, a careless disregard for boundaries, or a failure to recognize worth can undo months or even years of effort. People may not always articulate the lack of respect directly, but they feel it deeply and it erodes connection from within. When respect is compromised, trust crumbles silently until there is little left to hold on to. What makes respect foundational is that it enables every other positive quality to thrive. Love without respect becomes controlling. Communication without respect becomes manipulative. Generosity without respect becomes condescending. But when respect is present, love deepens, communication becomes honest, and generosity becomes uplifting. Respect amplifies every effort, while its absence nullifies even the grandest gestures. Respect, though invisible, is the quiet force that sustains all connection. It cannot be substituted with intensity, charm, or persistence. Once it is broken, everything else struggles to stand because respect is the ground on which trust, love, and loyalty take root. Shall I expand a sex? Little things are never little, next in the same keynote style. Little things are never little because the details that often appear insignificant on the surface are usually the ones that carry the greatest emotional impact. In human connection, it is not the grand gestures or dramatic moments that leave the deepest imprint. It is the quiet, subtle actions that communicate presence, thoughtfulness, and care. A remembered detail, a small act of kindness, or a consistent acknowledgement can echo far louder in the heart than anything extravagant. What makes these little things powerful is that they reveal genuine attention, because only someone who is truly paying attention notices them. Details matter because they communicate value without needing explanation. Remembering the way someone takes their coffee, noticing when their tone shifts slightly, or acknowledging a small accomplishment shows that they are seen and heard. These moments may seem trivial to the one who gives them, but to the one who receives them, they become evidence of significance. People rarely remember every word spoken to them, but they almost always remember how they felt in the presence of another. The little things are what shape that feeling. In relationships, the accumulation of little things builds the foundation of trust and intimacy. A gentle touch on the shoulder, a text at the right moment, or the habit of listening without interruption. These are the actions that create safety and belonging. Grand gestures may impress for a day, but they cannot replace the quiet reassurance of steady attention. When the little things are neglected, relationships often weaken because it is not the absence of the extraordinary that causes distance, but the absence of the ordinary, meaningful moments that sustain connection. In leadership, little things shape culture more than policies or speeches. A leader who remembers names, acknowledges small contributions, or takes time to check in creates an environment of respect and loyalty. Employees may appreciate a raise or a formal recognition, but what truly inspires them is when they feel noticed in the everyday rhythm of their work. The detail of being acknowledged for something minor can motivate more than a single large reward because it demonstrates consistent awareness rather than occasional formality. In personal growth, the little things are the building blocks of transformation. Reading a few pages each day eventually leads to wisdom. A short daily workout produces greater results than an occasional burst of intensity. Journaling for a few minutes regularly can bring more clarity than hours of reflection done sporadically. The details of daily discipline, though small in themselves, compound into lasting change. Ignoring them often leads to stagnation, while honoring them creates momentum. The emotional weight of little things lies in their honesty. A large gesture can sometimes be performed out of obligation or even manipulation, but little things are harder to fake. They require presence, because presence is what allows someone to notice and respond in subtle ways. When someone consistently remembers small details, it proves they were attentive, and attention is the highest form of respect. This is why people often treasure the smallest memories. A smile held a second longer, a word said at just the right time, a thoughtful gesture that no one else noticed. Neglecting little things can have the opposite effect. A lack of attention to detail often communicates indifference, even when no harm was intended. Forgetting a meaningful date, failing to acknowledge effort, or ignoring subtle emotional cues can leave wounds that words alone cannot heal. The absence of little things does not feel small, it feels like neglect. Just as their presence strengthens bonds, their absence weakens them. Little things are never little because they carry disproportionate meaning. They are the threads that weave relationships, the habits that shape growth, and the cues that build trust. While they may appear minor in the moment, their impact accumulates quietly until it defines the entire experience. The details reveal the truth, because only through them can one see the depth of care, attention, and respect that cannot be faked or forced.